Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down the complex and honestly terrifying chain of events that led to the single most devastating conflict in all of human history, World War II.
Just look at that number, 85 million. That's the best estimate we have for the number of lives lost. It's a staggering cost that didn't just change the map, it completely reshaped the entire world. And it left scars we can still see today.
So the big question is, how? How on earth did the world let this happen? Well, to answer that, we actually have to go back in time, to the end of the First World War. That's where the very first domino was set up, just waiting to be tipped over.
Right, so let's start at the beginning. After World War I, the victorious powers, we're talking mainly Britain and France, they imposed the Treaty of Versailles on Germany. And let's be crystal clear about this. This wasn't really a treaty for peace. It was designed for punishment.
And you can really see here how these punishments created a perfect storm of misery. Germany lost vital territory and all its colonies. The economic hardship was, well, it was unimaginable. These crippling payments led to hyperinflation, where money became basically worthless. I mean, people were literally using wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread. On top of all that, its military was stripped down to almost nothing, leaving the nation feeling vulnerable and totally humiliated. You can see how this all fueled a deep, burning resentment that would prove to be incredibly dangerous.
So, with all this widespread anger and instability, you get this huge power vacuum. And you know what happens with vacuums, right? Something always rushes in to fill them. In this case, it was radical, new ideologies offering simple and very dangerous solutions.
And this is where fascism really starts to take hold. It's an ideology all about absolute state control and super aggressive nationalism. And you can kind of see the appeal, right, can't you? If you're a nation feeling broken and humiliated, fascism comes along and promises to restore strength, order, and national pride. It was a really powerful message for people who were just desperate.
Now this is a really crucial point. While Mussolini's fascism in Italy was definitely authoritarian, Hitler's Nazism in Germany added this uniquely toxic racist layer. The Nazis pushed this horrible, false idea of a superior Aryan race and used incredibly effective propaganda to scapegoat Jewish people, blaming them for every single one of Germany's problems.
So as Hitler starts to just openly break the rules of the Versailles Treaty, rebuilding the army, eyeing his neighbors, the rest of the world has a choice to make. Stand up to him, or give him what he wants and hope he stops. They chose the second option. They chose appeasement.
And this timeline just shows you the disastrous pattern. With every single violation, marching troops into the Rhineland, taking over Austria, demanding parts of Czechoslovakia, Britain and France just hoped he'd finally be satisfied. But every time they gave in, he didn't see it as a peace offering. He saw it as weakness. It didn't bring peace, it just made him bolder, proving to him that he could get away with anything.
I mean, it was just a fatal miscalculation. The whole policy was based on this wishful thinking that Hitler could be reasoned with, that he could be satisfied. But his goal was never, ever compromise. It was conquest. His ambition was to completely upend the entire European order.
So, with diplomacy having totally failed, those last few dominoes begin to fall, and they fall fast, triggering a conflict that would very soon swallow the entire globe. To make his conquest happen, Germany had this terrifying new military playbook called Blitzkrieg, which literally means lightning war. And that's what it was, a strategy designed for swift, overwhelming victory, using coordinated air and tank attacks to just smash through enemy lines and create total chaos.
And this was the final straw. On September 1st, 1939, Germany unleashes its Blitzkrieg on Poland. Britain and France, finally honoring their pledge to protect Poland, declare war. But it was too late. Poland was swiftly and brutally overrun. The war in Europe had begun.
For 2 years, America watched all this from the sidelines, officially neutral. That all changed on December 7th, 1941. Japan, Germany's ally, launched a devastating surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Their goal was to cripple the American fleet, but what it actually did was shock and unify the entire nation. The very next day, the U.S. declared war, and the European conflict became a truly global one.
Okay, so the war is now officially global, and the fate of millions really rested on the shoulders of just a handful of key leaders. Their decisions, their personalities, their ideologies, they wouldn't just steer the war, they would shape the future of the entire world. Let's start with Great Britain and Winston Churchill. Now, this is a guy who had been a lonely voice for years, warning anyone who would listen not to appease Hitler. When he finally became Prime Minister in 1940, his famous bulldog-like defiance was exactly what Britain needed to survive its darkest hour.
It was his voice, broadcast over the radio in these powerful, inspiring speeches that really embodied British resistance. He made it absolutely clear that Britain would never, ever surrender, even when it stood almost completely alone against the Nazi war machine.
Now let's hop across the Atlantic to the United States and Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR, as pretty much everyone knew him. He had already led America through the Great Depression, and now he had to guide the nation into this massive global conflict right after Pearl Harbor.
With this famous declaration, Roosevelt was essentially committing America's unbelievable industrial might to supplying the Allied war effort. All the ships, planes, tanks, and guns that American factories pumped out were absolutely instrumental in tipping the scales of the war.
And of course, there's the man at the center of it all, the architect of the war, Adolf Hitler. He rose to power by expertly tapping into all that post-World War I anger and hardship we talked about, promising to restore Germany's greatness. Everything he did was driven by this toxic belief in German supremacy, and this just relentless, insatiable desire for more land, more power. His ambition was the engine that drove this whole conflict forward, and it left behind a legacy of death and destruction on a scale the world had never seen.
And finally, we have one of the most ruthless figures of the 20th century, Joseph Stalin, the dictator of the Soviet Union. Now, Stalin was a cunning, brutal leader who was really just looking out for himself. He actually signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler at first, which gave Hitler the green light to invade Poland.
But of course, Hitler eventually betrayed him. In 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union, and that forced Stalin's hand. He had to join the Allies, bringing the massive Soviet Red Army into the fight. This opened up a brutal Eastern Front that would become absolutely critical to Germany's eventual defeat.
So when you look back, you can see it, right? It wasn't just one single thing. It was a chain reaction, a series of falling dominoes, from a punishing peace that bred resentment to the rise of extreme nationalism and that fatal miscalculation of appeasement. It's a powerful and, frankly, a chilling lesson about the dangers of unchecked aggression and failed diplomacy. And it really forces us to look around today and ask, are we doing enough to recognize those same warning signs in our world?